The day my family decided I deserved nothing, they made sure I was sitting there to hear every word. It wasn't gossip. It wasn't a text. It was right in front of me. All of them. I remember the way my mother wouldn't even look at me while the will was being read, just sitting there with her hands still in her lap, like everything had been settled long before that moment. My brother was leaned back, looking like he just wanted it to be over. My sister didn't say a word. And when they finally got to my name, they didn't dance around it. It wasn't divided. It wasn't reduced. It was erased. I didn't react right away. Not because I didn't understand, because I did. And way too fast. The lawyer paused, like he was expecting something. A question. A reaction. But I didn't give him that satisfaction. Or better yet, I didn't give it to any of them. I looked at my mother. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked. She finally turned to me, not even trying to hide it. "You have a stable job, Marie. You're successful," she said. "You'll be fine." Stable. Like that explained everything. Like that justified them cutting me out of the will. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "And them?" I asked, looking at my brother and my sister. "They need it more," she said with a forced smile. Simple, direct. And then her face went cold again. "My name is Marie Banks. I'm 31 now, but I was 29 when I sat in that room and understood something I should have seen a long time before. I was never part of that family the way I thought I was. I was convenient. You know? The one they kept close when they needed something handled. Something fixed. Something carried. But still replaceable. My father had just died. And even then, they didn't care. I wasn't someone they protected. I was someone they manipulated. No one came after me. No one explained anything else. And I didn't stay either. I walked out of that office without arguing, without questioning, without asking for anything. Because something had already changed in me. Our paths had split. 3 years passed after that. No calls, no visits, no pretending. Just distance. Until that morning, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. And when I opened the door, they were all there. Together. Again. And not even close. To the same people who had said all those things to me. If you've ever been discarded like you had no value, and then suddenly remembered when everything started falling apart, then you understand me. So help me get this story in front of more people by leaving a like. That might be the thing that reminds us. Some decisions are inevitable. Because that moment gave me a warning. That wasn't a visit. It was a return. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there with my hand still on the door, looking at all of them, trying to understand what exactly I was seeing. Because it didn't fit. Not after 3 years. Not after the way they cut me out and kept living like I had never been there. My mother was the first to speak. "Marie, we need to talk," she said. Her voice wasn't soft. It wasn't apologetic either. It was urgent. I looked at her, then at the rest of them. "We?" I asked. She hesitated for a second. "All of us." That almost made me laugh. 3 years of silence, and now suddenly it was all of us. My brother wouldn't look at me. My sister was standing there trying to hold herself together, but something in her face already looked off. Tight. Tired. Like life had stopped cooperating with the version she sold people. "What do you want?" I asked. My mother let out a breath, already irritated. "Can we not do this at the door?" I leaned a little more against the frame. "This is fine." Must that change the air right away? She noticed. They all did. Because they were used to talking at me, not being held outside by me. My sister stepped in then. "We're not here to fight," she said quickly. "Things just got bad. Bad." I stayed quiet for a second. Then I asked, "For who?" No one answered. That told me enough. My brother finally spoke, low and flat. "We need help." There it was. No apology, no shame. Just need. I looked at all three of them again, and what hit me wasn't anger first. It was the memory of that office. My father dead. My name erased. My mother saying I'd be fine. And now here they were, standing at my door, looking like I was the only thing they had left to reach for. That was the part that settled in me. Not that they came back. Why? Because 3 years ago, I was easy to remove. Now I was useful again. And that changed the whole shape of the moment. I didn't move from the door. Not yet. I just looked at them for a second longer, letting that word sit between us. Help. It didn't land the way they thought it would. What kind of help? I asked. My mother answered too fast. Financial, she said. Of course. I nodded once, slow. And the money you got? I asked. From the will. That hit. You could see it. Not like a shock. More like something they didn't want to explain out loud. My sister looked away first. My brother rubbed the back of his neck like he was already tired of the conversation. My mother stayed still. We invested, she said. I held her gaze. In what? She hesitated. That was enough. Because when people believe in what they did, they don't pause like that. Things didn't work out, she added. There it was. Not details, not accountability, just outcome. I leaned slightly against the frame, arms relaxed, but I felt something settle inside me. A clarity. Because I already knew what that meant. Money like that doesn't just disappear. It gets spent, badly, quickly. Let me guess, I said. Trips, cars, stuff you didn't need. My brother let out a quiet breath, like I had said something obvious. My sister didn't react. My mother's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about, she said. I almost nodded, because that was also familiar. Deny first, minimize next, then ask anyway. So how much is left? I asked. Silence. Longer this time, and that told me everything. I let out a small breath through my nose, looking down for a second before meeting her eyes again. Nothing, I said. Not a question. A statement. My mother didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. Because it was all there. In the way they stood. In the way they couldn't hold eye contact. In the way they showed up at my door instead of solving it themselves. And that's when the shift inside me became complete. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just distance. Because 3 years ago, they made a decision thinking they had more than enough. And now they were here, asking the one person they had decided they didn't need. And for the first time since I opened that door, I stopped seeing them as family, and started seeing them for what they actually were in that moment. People with a problem. I stayed at the door, didn't invite them in, didn't step out either, just held that space exactly where it was. So, I said, you spent everything. My mother's expression tightened. That's not what happened, she replied. I tilted my head slightly. Then explain it. She didn't. Of course she didn't. Because there wasn't a version of that story that made her look in control anymore. My sister crossed her arms, shifting her weight like she was getting uncomfortable. It wasn't just spending, she said. There were things we had to deal with. Like what? I asked. She hesitated. That was enough. My brother finally looked at me just for a second. Stuff got out of hand, he said. Out of hand. I let that sit, because that's what people say when they don't want to say irresponsible, or reckless, or stupid. My mother stepped in again, trying to take the lead back. We're not here to go over every detail, she said. We're here because we need support. Support. I almost smiled. Same pattern, different word. 3 years ago, I didn't need support. I needed to accept being cut out. Now they needed support. I adjusted my grip on the door slightly, still not opening it any further. And you thought of me, I said. Not sarcastic, just clear. My sister exhaled, frustrated. You're acting like this is nothing to you. I looked at her. No, I said. I'm acting like I remember. That landed. She didn't respond. None of them did. Because memory is inconvenient when you're asking for help from someone you hurt. My mother's voice came lower this time. We're family, Marie. There it was. The last card. I held her gaze. We weren't, I said, calm, when it mattered. Silence. Real silence. Not the kind you fill, the kind that stays. And for a second, no one tried to fix it. Because there was nothing left to adjust. They had already made their decision back then. And now, they were standing in front of mine. No one spoke for a few seconds. Not my mother. Not my brother. Not even my sister. That silence. It wasn't confusion. It was them realizing this wasn't going the way they expected. My mother tried again. We didn't come here to fight, she said, softer now. We just need a little help to get back on our feet. I let that sit. A little help. That's how she framed it. Like it was temporary. Like it was reasonable. Like it didn't come after everything that happened. How much? I asked. That caught her off guard. What? How much do you need? I repeated. She hesitated. Then said it. 200,000. Just like that. No build-up. No shame. I let out a slow breath, looking at her like I was making sure I heard it right. 200,000, I repeated. My brother looked away. My sister pressed her lips together. My mother held my gaze, like saying it with confidence would make it smaller. And that's when it really hit me. Not the number. The distance. Because 3 years ago, they decided I didn't deserve anything. And now they were standing at my door asking me for more than most people make in years. Like it was a normal conversation. I nodded slowly. Then I said, no. No explanation. No hesitation. Just that. It landed harder than anything else I could have said. My mother blinked, like she needed a second to process it. Marie, she started sharper now. Don't be like this. Like this, I repeated. I almost smiled, because that was always the line. Whenever I stopped playing the role they expected, I'm not being anything, I said. I'm just answering. My sister stepped forward slightly. You're seriously going to turn your back on us? She asked. I looked at her, then at all of them. You already did that, I said. And that was it. Nothing dramatic. No raised voice. Just truth. Placed exactly where it belonged. If you've ever been treated like you didn't matter, until someone needed something from you, you already know how this feels. So subscribe, because some stories aren't about revenge. They're about finally seeing people clearly, and standing there, looking at all of them waiting for me to change my answer. I realized something else. They still thought this was a negotiation. No one moved after that. Not right away. Like they were waiting for me to take it back, adjust it, soften it. I didn't. My mother was the first to break. You're being cold, she said. I nodded slightly. I know. That threw her off more than anything else. Because I didn't defend, didn't argue, just accepted it. My sister stepped in again, sharper now. You're really going to sit there and act like you're better than us? I looked at her. No, I said. I'm acting like I learned. That landed. You could see it in her face, that quick shift from attack to something else, something less stable. My brother finally spoke, more frustrated now. So that's it? You just say no and close the door on us? I leaned slightly against the frame. That's what you did, I said. Silence. Again. But this one felt different. He didn't push back, didn't argue, because he remembered. They all did. My mother exhaled hard, running a hand through her hair. You're going to regret this, she said. That one was automatic, not thought through, just thrown. I held her gaze. No, I said, and I meant it. Not out of anger, not to prove a point, Just clarity. Because regret only comes when you act against yourself. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't doing that. She looked at me for a second longer, like she was trying to find something to grab onto. Some version of me that would bend, that would step back into the role. It wasn't there anymore. You've changed, she said. I almost nodded. I had to. That was the truth. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just real. Another silence. Then my sister turned away first. My brother followed. My mother stayed a second longer. Then she said, "Lower this time. This isn't over." I didn't respond, because I already knew something she didn't. It was. And as they started walking away from the door, one after the other, I didn't feel guilt, didn't feel doubt, just something quiet settling in. The kind that only comes when you finally stop going back to places that never held you right. I closed the door. Not fast, not hard. Just enough to end it. And for a second, I stayed there, hand still on the handle, listening. Their footsteps fading down the hallway. My mother saying something under her breath. My sister answering, sharper. My brother, quiet. That part didn't change. Then silence. Real silence again. I let out a slow breath, stepping back into my apartment. The air felt different, not lighter. Just mine. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, letting everything settle where it needed to. Because moments like that don't hit all at once. They land in layers, the words, the looks, the way they stood there like I was still supposed to fix things for them. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I looked at it for a second before answering. "Marie Banks?" a man's voice said. "Yes. This is Blake Lang. I believe you spoke with my office 3 years ago after your father's passing." That made me straighten slightly. Not panic. Attention. "Yes," I said. "I'm calling because there's been a development regarding your father's estate," he continued. I didn't interrupt, but I felt it. That shift. Small, but precise. "What kind of development?" I asked. A pause. Measured. Then he said, "There's a codicil attached to the original will. It was sealed, pending review." I didn't say anything, because I knew enough to understand what that meant. "And?" I asked. His tone stayed even. "It directly concerns you." That landed differently. Not loud, but deep. "I think it would be best if you came in," he added. I looked down at the glass in my hand for a second, then back up. "When?" I asked. "As soon as possible." "Of course." I nodded to myself. "All right," I said. "I'll be there." We ended the call, and I stayed there for a moment, phone still in my hand, letting that word settle in my head. Codicil. Because timing like that doesn't happen by accident. 3 years of silence. They show up at my door. Ask for money. I say no, and then this call. Something had been sitting there the whole time, waiting. And now it was moving. I set the phone down slowly, already knowing one thing before I even stepped out of my apartment again. This wasn't just about what they lost. It was about what had never been finished. Blake's office hadn't changed. Same building, same quiet hallway, same kind of silence that makes everything feel heavier the second you sit down. I checked in, gave my name, and sat there for a minute with my bag still on my lap, already replaying the word in my head. Codicil. That wasn't small. That wasn't the kind of thing people forget to mention by accident. Blake Lang greeted me without wasting time. "Marie," he said, opening the folder in front of him. "I'll be direct." I nodded. "Good." He adjusted the papers on his desk, then looked at me. "Your father signed a codicil shortly before his condition worsened. It was meant to be reviewed if concerns came up about how the will was handled." That landed fast. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. "Potential undue influence," he said. Clean, precise. I sat still for a second, just letting that settle where it needed to. Because I knew exactly who that pointed to. Blake slid the document toward me. The codicil reinstates you. I looked at him. Fully? He nodded. Fully. With added provisions tied to recovery of dissipated estate assets. That hit differently. Recovery. Meaning what they had burned through wasn't just gone. It could come back on them. I looked down at the page. My name was there. Clear. Undeniable. Not erased. Restored. I let out a slow breath and asked, "What happens now?" Blake didn't hesitate. "We proceed. Legally and thoroughly." Of course. And in that moment, everything from earlier that day made more sense. The urgency, the visit, the desperation at my door. They knew something was coming. Maybe not all of it, but enough to panic. For the first time since that will reading, I wasn't outside the decision anymore. I was back inside it. And this time, I wasn't the one being cut out. I didn't rush out of the office. Not because I needed more explanation. Because I wanted a second to sit with it. The paper was still in front of me, my name sitting there like it had never been removed in the first place. Like those 3 years hadn't happened. But they had. And that was the difference. I looked up at Blake. "They knew something, didn't they?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Measured, like everything else about him. "They were notified that a review could take place," he said. "Not the outcome." I nodded slowly. So they felt it coming. Just not how far it would go. "That's why they came today," I said, more to myself than to him. Blake didn't disagree. "They're likely aware that their position isn't as secure as they assumed," he added. Secure. That word sat wrong, because they were never careful. They were comfortable. And comfort makes people sloppy. I leaned back slightly, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "They already spent most of it," I said. Blake gave a small nod. "That aligns with what we've seen." Of course it did. That part didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how quickly it all connected. The visit, the number they asked for, the urgency in my mother's voice. They weren't rebuilding. They were trying to cover something. "Can it actually be recovered?" I asked. Blake met my gaze. "Yes." No hesitation. That was enough. I nodded once. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just clarity settling deeper. Because this wasn't about taking anything from them. It was about correcting something that should never have happened in the first place. I stood up after that, picking up the document. It felt different in my hands than I expected. Not heavy, not symbolic, just real. "Keep me updated," I said. Blake stood as well. "You'll be informed at every step." I gave a small nod and walked out. Same hallway, same silence. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now I understood something I hadn't fully seen when they were standing at my door. They didn't come just because they needed help. They came because they were running out of time. And for the first time since all of this started, I knew exactly where I stood when it finally ran out. I didn't hear from them again after that. Not right away. No calls, no messages. Just silence. But it wasn't the same kind as before. This one had weight, because this time it wasn't distance. It was consequence catching up. A few weeks later, everything started moving. Formal notices, legal filings, numbers being pulled apart and put back together the way they should have been from the beginning. I didn't need to chase anything. Blake handled it. Precise, quiet, final. What had been spent didn't just disappear. It came back as liability, debts, claims, pressure they couldn't talk their way out of. And slowly, piece by piece, it collapsed. The house went first. Foreclosure, clean, public. I didn't go to watch. I didn't need to. By the time it was over, the same place I had been pushed out of years ago was back on the market. I bought it, not out of revenge, not to prove anything, because it was mine to begin with. Walking through it again felt different. Not emotional, not nostalgic, just clear. Like stepping into something that had finally been put back where it belonged. A few days later, they reached out. Not together this time. One by one. My sister first, then my brother, then my mother. Short messages, different words, same meaning. They needed somewhere to go. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was thinking about what to do, because I already knew. When I finally replied, it was simple. I have rooms available. That was it. No explanation. No softness added. Just truth. Because at that point, that's all there was left between us. They didn't respond. And they didn't come back after that. And I didn't reach out. Because some distances don't come from anger. They come from understanding. From finally seeing people without the version you created in your head. If you've ever had to accept that the people you thought were your safety were actually your lesson, subscribe. Because sometimes the only way to move forward is to stop waiting for people to become who they never were. And in the end, this was never about getting back at them. It was about finally standing in a place where I didn't need anything from them anymore.